Doc Fred back with you again. You remember that our natural history mystery had to do with when is a flower not a flower? And this is the one that is not a flower, believe it or not. This actually is hundreds of flowers probably, all together making up what looks like one. So these are the ray flowers on the edge. And if you look carefully in the middle, you can see hundreds of little flowers all forming what we call the disc. So this is not one flower, this is hundreds of flowers all together in a group. So it's not a flower, it is a kind of thing referred to as an inflorescence, which is a grouping of flowers. And most flowers actually form inflorescences. All the others that I showed you are singular flowers. Each one is a single flower. Here we have hundreds of single flowers all together in a group called an inflorescence. So that's the answer to the natural history mystery. Now, it is a mystery. Plants in general are a mystery to most people. Flowers in particular are very mysterious. You may know something about other kinds of plants like mosses and ferns and others that produce spores for reproduction. I have some examples over here. I have some examples of some very primitive plants that do not produce seeds, they have no flowers. They reproduce mainly by what we call spores, which are single cells that can blow out in the wind, and if they find a good place, they start to grow. And in most cases, the spores will produce a tiny little plant that reproduces by sexual reproduction, and then it grows into this again. So here we see in this moss, these little things called capsules that are growing out of the moss, and those contain the spores. So the plant spreads its spores around in the air, and that's the way it reproduces. Ferns are similar, and their spores are contained in some cases on the backs of their leaves, and if you look really close, you can see the beginnings of all the places where the spores will eventually form. This is still immature, but it's starting. Or other kinds of ferns have special leaves, like this one, special leaves that all they do is produce spores. So this is a normal leaf, and this is a spore-forming leaf. So that's the way primitive plants reproduce. Well, it turns out that flowering plants also produce spores, and the spores also grow into tiny plants, but everything takes place inside the parent plant, so you can't see it. It's all inside, microscopically. So in the female part of the plant, a spore forms the egg and all kinds of other structures that will eventually be part of the seed. And in the male part of the plant, the spores germinate to form pollen grains, which are really microscopic plants themselves. And those get carried away by the wind or maybe by insects to other plants, and then they develop even further. They grow further. So the pollen actually grows a little bit more and eventually fertilizes the egg in the female plant. So all of it is still there, it's just all hidden away mysteriously inside the flower where nobody is looking. But it's basically the same thing as a primitive plant forming spores and reproducing by means of spores. So I encourage all of you to go out into nature, maybe just your backyard, and take a look at some flowers. See if you can distinguish the ones that are inflorescences from the ones that are just singular individual flowers. Take this time to explore nature. You've got a lot of places to look and a lot of interesting things to see. I enjoyed very much presenting this natural history mystery to you this week, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And I really hope that you'll come back next week and participate in the next natural history mystery.